Welcome back to Zilog and Moto. Now, before you start with, Dave, why on earth are you reviewing a fishing game that no one on earth cares about? There's not even any information about this game on the internet. Well, it's true, this probably is a low interest game, and it probably won't generate a whole lot of views. But I set out to review every English language Master System, Genesis, Sega CD, and 32X game. And I'm going to do it if it kills me. And unfortunately, that means reviewing stinkers like this. So I figured rather than complain about it, let's go ahead and get to the game, like scheduled, and next week we'll move on to something more interesting. Last week, you may have heard me mention that this week's game was from a genre that I'd never played in 30 plus years of gaming. And that's true, I've never played a fishing video game of any kind before this week, and that includes those gimmicky arcade fishing games as well. I've been curious about them, sure, especially the ones that come with a special, ride and reel controller. Oh yes, that's the thing, if you weren't aware. Is it really that much stranger than the plastic guitars from Guitar Hero and Rock Band? Yeah, it is. Well, crazy controllers or no, and it's a no for the Genesis as they didn't exist back then. Let's talk about the origins of this game for a minute, specifically the name. If you're watching this video in 2019 or beyond, and aren't originally from the southern United States, you may never have heard of TNN, as it hadn't exactly existed in any form since 2013, and in the form depicted in this game since 2003. So what is TNN and what does TNN stand for? As it was originally designated, TNN was a country music-oriented channel called the Nashville Network, particularly due to its relation to the Grand Ole Opry and Opryland, USA. Eventually, the channel started to break out from its music-oriented beginnings and began to run other content that matched up with its primary demographic. This content consisted of two divisions: TNN Motorsports, which covered all sorts of racing, including NASCAR, monster trucks, World Outlaws, and TNN Outdoors, which consisted of outdoor sports programming centered around hunting and fishing shows. Later on, TNN would be bought and sold a few times and changed its name first to the National Network, then to Spike TV, which probably most of you are familiar with, and most recently in early 2018 to the Paramount Network. However, today's game focuses on that earlier TNN Outdoors era, as you might imagine with it being a bass fishing game. Growing up in the southeastern United States, I'm familiar with all these eras of the network, and I definitely remember watching a few of the blooper episodes of Bill Downs Outdoors when Nothing Was Better was on. Now, I'm not really clear how this series of games came about, and yes, it is a series, as this game has a sequel that we'll get to in about 100 episodes. I don't know if software developer Ask Games came up with the idea to produce fishing and motorsports games and went to TNN to broker a licensing deal, or if executives from TNN decided they wanted to expand their brand by going into video games and looked for a company to help them out, which ended up being Ask. But regardless of the TNN branding, today's title is a fishing simulation game that sees your character attempting to work his way through 3 bass fishing tournaments. So, does TNN Bass Tournament of Champions bring the unbridled excitement of televised bass fishing home? And is the game more interesting than watching paint dry? Both good questions. Let's take a closer look. And be forewarned, this might be one of my shorter videos, and you should probably be happy about that. TNN Bass Tournament of Champions. I can't believe I keep saying that full name. Maybe I should shorten it to TBTOC or Tib Talk. Anyway, you see I've got this game in a Mylar self-sealing bag, similar to a comic book bag, and I'm sure you're probably wondering, why? Well, the game just came like this when I got it, and I never bothered to take it out of the bag or move it to a different game. And I thought it was just kind of funny that this particular game was being protected by a separate bag, so I just, left it as it was. Taking the game out of the bag, we can see that the clamshell is in good shape, with the hang tab intact, and actually relatively free of dust, which I guess is thanks to that Mylar bag. There's a small chunk taken out of one of the upper corners here, which I'm guessing is probably being dropped at some point, but other than that, it's very clean. The inner cover has a picture of what I guess is a bass being caught by some people in the background. You can see down there, and the lines coming across over here to go in the mouth. And now that I think about it, it's kind of disturbing.
When I first looked at the cover, I just assumed it was a picture of a fish, which made sense, but looking closer and seeing that it was a frozen close-up of a fish desperately trying to not get caught, eesh. I'm not that squeamish, and I've certainly eaten my share of meat, but something just strikes me as wrong about this. Anyway, let's move on. Flipping over to the back, you have the logo for the game again up top, and followed by an accurate summary of the game and some features from the game down here, along with 3 screenshots of the game that appear to be taken from a CRT TV. None of these screenshots look very good, and especially this last one down here. Holy moly. Which really has me questioning whether it's actually from this game or a canceled NES version. Spoiler alert, it's not an error. This game actually looks that bad in places. As we open the case, you can see the cartridge in good shape, right here, along with the manual, which is also in good shape, minus this small crease up here at the top, and a poster for the games. Let me see if I can unfold this real quick and show this off. And there you go, there's the poster. And up top there, watch your favorite fishing shows only on TNN Outdoors. So again, this is kind of a, sort of an advertisement. This game was basically served as an advertisement for the TV channel. Back to the manual. Technically speaking, the manual does explain how to play the game. There are sections in here about, say, toward the back, what the various icons on the screen are for, what the 3 different tournaments are. That's actually back toward the beginning. We got the junior tournament, the ASC tournament, and the TNN Bass Tournament of Champions. Oh, look at that prize money. Big time there. And how to attempt to reel in a fish, which is probably the most important part of the game. Let's see if I can figure out which page that's in. Yeah, right here. Fishing. Would you believe that? But I've got to be honest, when I first picked up this game, I was a bit lost. While it wasn't difficult to figure out how to play the game, I still don't think I know how to play the game well, and it's because of a severe lack of details in the manual. There's just really not a whole lot in here. I mean, I know it looks like a sort of a standard manual, but there's just a lot of finer details about the game that are not covered in here. Perhaps certain things in the game make sense if you're familiar with fishing and are just second nature, but for someone like me who hasn't fished once, or only fished when I was about 4 or 5, and it's been a long time, the game ends up being a crapshoot. There's a section toward the back of the manual where it mentions all the different fishing shows that run at TNN at the time. It's right here. Which kind of makes the game come off as a thinly veiled advertisement for the network, as we already saw by the poster. And that idea is bolstered by a line on the back at the case of the bottom that basically serves as advertised for the network. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, right here. For secret tips and surprises, watch your favorite fishing shows on TNN Outdoors. Okay, so now we've basically got 3 times where the game has told us to watch fishing shows on TNN. Now, I think there's probably a 110% chance that there never was any information given out regarding this game on the network, other than perhaps an odd commercial. But I could be wrong, and even if there was, it's certainly useless to me now. It really would have been beneficial to the player to have more information in the manual about the ins and outs, or how the temperature and light take an effect on fishing, just for instance, but ASC certainly couldn't be bothered with that. Oh well, let's get to some in-game footage so you can get bored of this self-proclaimed lake simulator and prematurely move on to something else. So I somewhat wanted to just have the review of the game state, quote, "It's a fishing game," along with 10 seconds of game footage before going to the wrap-up. But that seems like a bit of a cop-out, and probably not that funny. Let's try to do the review for real, but I'll be honest, there's not really a whole ton here to talk about. Upon starting Tib Talk, you get a splash screen of another bass on a line, followed by the customary publisher-developer screens, and then eventually the game menu. The game menu has 5 options, the first of which, no lie, is a music selection screen. Now, I don't know about you, but any game where playing the game isn't the first option on the startup seems a bit problematic. And even more so if it's a music selection screen. That just screams great, engaging gameplay, doesn't it? Well, anyway, regardless of whether it should have been the first option or not, the music selection screen has a list of 13 tracks you can preview. And interestingly enough, not all of them are country music related. Some are more techno-based, as you'd expect with a video game, and some are more bluesy. From this screen, you can not only preview all of the tracks, you can choose the default track that plays during gameplay, or completely turn off the music and/or sound effects. I'm not sure why you'd want to have the options to turn off the music and sound effects, but they're there, and being able to choose your background music is a nice option, as a simulated day of fishing will take a while, and hearing the same music every tournament you attempt will get really old. Now, I don't really understand why they couldn't just loop those 13 tracks during gameplay to keep things moving, but I guess it might be some sort of RAM programming limitation. I guess. I'm probably being a little too nice here, but let's just move on anyway. The sound effects in the game that exist aren't bad, but there aren't very many of them, which again raises the question of why there needed to be an option to turn them off. Reeling the fishes in sounds like you would expect, with the occasional splash as fishes jump out of the water. And your boat makes minimal motorboat engines noises as you drive around the lake. It's hard for me to say that they did a good job with the sound effects when there's just not that many of them, but overall I'd say the audio in this game is decent, minus some weird music dropouts that occur during fishing. I assume those happen when the music track ends and it takes a second restart, and it's technically a glitch that they didn't fix, but it doesn't happen often, so it doesn't really cause too many problems. Moving on from the audio, the other 4 game options involve setting your player's name, starting a free fishing mode, entering a bass fishing tournament, and finally restoring a save game. Yes, as one of the nice unexpected things about this game, you can save in 15 different save slots to allow multiple people to play, or to allow you to strategically save multiple games if you're cautious about equipment purchases and tournament progress. However, one slight drawback to the save system, there doesn't appear to be any way to delete a save game, so the only way to reuse an existing save slot is to save over what's already there. This is fine, but seems a bit sloppy. My copy of the game still has about 8 save games from the previous owners on it, which is kind of cool to see once. The free fishing mode allows you to try out different items from the pro shop and also go looking for good fishing spots at each of the 6 lakes in the game. Also, along with choosing the lake that you fish at, you can set the weather and temperature at the lake, as the temperature of the water and the amount of sunlight and wind will affect the fishing experience. Or at least that's what it says in the manual. Again, since the manual is a bit light on details regarding how to fish, at least as far as the game is concerned, I don't really know. How do you actually fish? Well, you leave the dock in your fishing boat, seek out a spot on the lake where your fish radar shows that there are fish, and then choose the option to start fishing. If there are indeed fish in the area, they will be shown on a mini-map as white dots. You then use the A button to throw your line out in the water, which is then shown on the minimap as well, and you attempt to guide your lure near one of the fish. If you're lucky, the status screen will indicate that you've gotten a bite, and you'll need to hit the C button to try to start reeling the fish in by pressing A again. If it's a big fish, you'll be told that your line is taut, and you will need to attempt to thumb the line by hitting B to tire the fish out to make it easier to reel in. If you don't, you run the risk of losing the fish, and your lure that you had selected. I don't really have a problem with the gameplay itself, other than it's a bit boring doing the same thing over and over again until you hopefully collect enough of the right fish, and that there really needs to be a specific meter that shows just how much strain is on your line, rather than you having to guess when to thumb the line versus reel. It's a fishing game. I'm not really sure what anyone would expect here. Once you're done messing around in the free fishing mode, it's probably time to start attacking tournament mode. Tournament mode starts your character out with $250, and you're able to enter the junior tournament. Before venturing on the lake, you have the ability to visit the pro shop and use your $250 to purchase additional items for your tackle box, or perhaps perform very slight upgrades on your equipment, as $250 doesn't go very far unless you're purchasing lures or fishing line. Let's stop and discuss the pro shop a bit. In the pro shop, as I said, you can purchase additional lures and spools of fishing line, but you can also purchase better rods, reels, and even fishing boats. It refers to the pro shop as the Bass Pro Shops, but I can't quite tell if it's a licensed advertisement for the real Bass Pro Shop or just an unfortunate coincidence. The Pro Shop does also sell gear with real brand names and has certain logos in the background of the shop screen, so there definitely is marketing deals made with certain companies in an effort to give the game a bit more realism for fishermen, outdoor sportsmen. Yeah, just go with that last one. Now, I really like the idea of having to work your way up to better equipment by finishing well in the various tournaments. It gives the game a bit of an RPG feel. However, buying different equipment only really works if you know what the equipment does, or are sure that having that equipment is going to make aspects of the game easier. The problem is, while the Pro Shop gives descriptions and prices for each of the items, and it somewhat refers to their characteristics, it doesn't really spell out what makes certain items better than one another. I ended up just going with the usual RPG trope of whatever items are the most expensive or the best, and that works somewhat well, except I think there may be times where, depending on what the weather is or which lake you're at, that you should use certain lures over others, even if they're cheaper. But that's never really defined in either the game or the manual. Just a complete lost opportunity, and makes the game feel cheap. When you finally make it out onto whichever lake is holding the junior tournament, that aspect is set randomly when you attempt to start the tournament, you are free to take your boat out onto the water and attempt to catch fish. During gameplay, you can catch about 8 different types of fish, but any fish besides a large or smallmouth bass must be thrown back and does not count towards your tournament totals. You won't know which fish you've caught until you fully reel it in, which does lead to a nice bit of excitement if you manage to catch a bass, or grousing disappointment if it's something else, and doubly annoying if it turns out to be a large something else. So, since catching bass is kind of the whole point of the game, you'd think they'd make it at least easier to figure out how to catch them. Nope. I think certain lures make it easier to catch bass rather than other fish, or maybe just perform better in certain scenarios, but this isn't spelled out anywhere. Also, I think moving to certain parts of the lakes make bass appear more often, rather than just catching crappie, pikes, and other fish. But again, it seems like either they thought the people playing the game would automatically know where to look, or they just intended it to be a guessing game. Either way, it kinda sucks and isn't conducive to a fun experience. Once you're on the lake, you're given 9 hours in game time to catch up to 5 big mouth bass and 5 smallmouth bass. If you catch more than 5, the game will automatically throw back the smallest in your inventory, so you can keep attempting to up your total weight until time starts to run out, and you need to pilot your boat back to the dock. A quick note, and one that I don't really have a problem with, but as you play the game, if you're in either your tackle box menu to choose different items, or looking at your fish collection book to see how you're doing on the day, in-game time passes, and will pass unless you specifically pause the game. It would be nice to have been told this somewhere, and I think I'm starting to sound like a broken record with these complaints, but at least this is a minor thing that you will learn quickly, and makes some sense from a gameplay perspective. Assuming you finish the day in the top 3, you can then move on to the second tournament, the Ask Tournament, and then finally the namesake TNN Bass Tournament of Champions to try to take home the game's big prize. Having only 3 tournaments to potentially compete in seems a bit budget title-ish, and if you're good at the game, means you can probably finish it in just a couple hours. I myself, with minimal practice and fishing knowledge, managed to make it to the final tournament in just one night of doing research for this review. One final and major aspect to this game that we haven't discussed yet is its graphics. In a word, they are poor at best. The overhead fishing scenes, when you are navigating the boat around the lake, are very reminiscent of the NES, and probably could be done on the NES, minus a few colors. And the actual fishing scenes aren't much better, with the screen being divided into multiple status windows, leaving perhaps half the screen left for the actual gameplay. There's just no defending these graphics, especially in 1993. Overall, and I can't believe this review went even half this long, I'm giving TNN Bass Tournament of Champions a 2 out of 5. It probably really deserves just a 1, as it's boring, repetitive, poorly displayed, and lazily explained. But they did have the good sense to include the battery backup feature, and without that, it certainly would have just only earned 1 star. I really hope this isn't the best pro fishing game on the Genesis, but I'm definitely dreading figuring that out as I eventually play through the remaining 4 titles.
Well, I said at the start I'd never played a game in the pro fishing genre, and today I found out why that was probably a smart idea. I'm definitely a bit disappointed that so far games that have had a fishing as a minigame are much more fun than this, but I can't say I'm surprised at all. Tune in next week when I take a look at the Master System version of an arcade classic that also has a Genesis version. But I don't own that yet, and the Master System version came out first, so it probably makes sense to start there anyway. Remember, whatever you play, have fun, and be excellent to each other. Later.